You can visit almost anywhere on Earth. Almost. From the icy peaks of the Himalayas to the depths of the Amazon rainforest, the world feels mapped, charted, owned. But there are places that push back. Not with violence, but with silence. They don't make headlines, and they're not on travel brochures, because no one's allowed to go. Not tourists, not journalists. Sometimes, not even governments. These places exist in the open, stamped on atlases, marked by satellites. But when you try to approach them, something stops you. Sometimes nature, sometimes law, sometimes something. Deeper, they remain untouched not by accident, but by force or fear. And the few who've dared to cross those invisible lines, most don't return, and those who do rarely speak. These are not forgotten lands. These are the places the world refuses to let us see. Some are dangerous, others are sacred, and a few were made to be forgotten. But if we look away from these forbidden zones, we risk missing something critical, not just about the places themselves, but about who we are. Why does a modern government ban access to a lifeless island? Why are the doors to ancient archives still locked, centuries after the secrets inside stopped being relevant to war or faith? These aren't just quirks of geography or policy. They're signals, warnings perhaps, traces of buried power, of systems meant to control what we remember and what we don't. Behind every closed gate, there's a story the world decided was too volatile, too sacred, or too dangerous to be told. And the deeper you look, the more you realize what's off limits may be the key to everything we're still trying to understand. So before we go any further, ask yourself, what else might the world be hiding in plain sight? These aren't just restricted zones, they're clues. And if uncovering secrets like this fascinates you, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the places you're not supposed to know about. This journey is just getting started. And if you're watching this late at night, let it wash over you. The mystery, the quiet, the unanswered questions. Let your mind wander to the edges of the map, to the places no one visits, no one speaks of. Breathe slowly. There's no rush. If your eyes grow heavy, let them close. These secrets will still be here when you wake. In a corner of the Bay of Bengal, wrapped in turquoise waters and ringed by coral reefs, lies an island that the modern world has never touched and perhaps never will. North Sentinel Island isn't hidden, but it is wholly separate. While satellites glide overhead, GPS maps its edges, and passing ships give it a wide berth. The island's people remain locked in a different time. They are the Sentinelese, one of the last known uncontacted tribes on Earth, and perhaps the most fiercely independent. They do not have phones. They do not use metal tools, read books, build cities, or follow any modern religion. They have no recorded language, no known alliances, and no desire for diplomacy. The Sentinelese live, as they have for tens of thousands of years, using spears and arrows, fire and stone, boats without oars. Their huts are low, their footprints vanish in the sand, and their stories, if they share them, have never reached our ears. While empires rose and fell, while satellites beamed signals through space, while men walked on the moon, the Sentinelese walked along the same jungle paths as their ancestors. This is not isolation by accident. It is survival by intent. The Sentinelese have, generation after generation, rejected the modern world in the most absolute way possible, by making it clear they do not want to be known. Their silence is not ignorance, it's a decision. The outside world has offered the world everything: technology, medicine, trade, power. But for the Sentinelese, none of it is worth the cost of connection. What little we do know about them comes not from conversations, but from cautious observation and the few, often disastrous attempts to make contact. Their estimated population ranges between 50 and 150 individuals, though no one knows for sure. They are likely descendants of some of the earliest humans to leave Africa, settling in the Andaman Islands over 60,000 years ago. The Sentinelese have endured without farming, factories, or fossil fuels. They fish, they hunt, they gather fruit. They build their homes from palm leaves and live under the open sky. The few aerial glimpses we've gathered show small clearings. In the dense forest, dugout canoes pulled along the beaches, and fires glowing faintly beneath the trees. But these images are distant, disconnected. The Sentinelese remain figures in the mist, not because we can't reach them, but because they do not wish to be reached. Anthropologists have long debated what it means to remain untouched. Is it innocence, resistance, wisdom, or something else entirely? For some, the Sentinelese represent a living fossil, a tribe frozen in time, preserved like an exhibit. But that view flattens them into something they are not. They are not relics. They are a sovereign people, deeply aware of their surroundings, capable of judgment and decision. And their clearest decision has been to say no. They have watched boats approach and fired arrows. They have seen gifts dropped from helicopters and refused them. They have seen the world creeping closer with cameras and caution and turned their backs. They do not ask for our protection. They do not seek our friendship. They simply want to be left alone. And they have paid, and made others pay, to ensure that they are not in a time when everything is connected, when distance collapses. Through screens and satellites, the Sentinelese remain defiantly apart. They challenge the belief that progress is inevitable. They refuse the idea that contact is always good. And in doing so, they've become something rare, a mystery not of the past, but of the present, a living contradiction. A people who do not wish to be discovered, and whose greatest act of power is absence. It's a truth most people don't understand until it's too late. North Sentinel Island doesn't just resist contact, it punishes it. For over a century, every outsider who dared to approach has been met with the same response. Arrows from the tree line, spears thrust through the air, unspoken warnings made in silence and death. On this island, strangers don't get a chance to explain themselves. They are seen as threats. They are treated as invaders. And they are almost never welcomed back. In 2006, 2 fishermen drifted too close to the island. They had fallen asleep in their boat while poaching crabs in forbidden waters. When their vessel ran aground on the beach, it was the last time anyone saw them alive. Days later, a search helicopter spotted their corpses pierced by arrows and spears lying in the sand. The helicopter couldn't land. When it tried to descend, the tribe launched volleys of arrows into the air, forcing it to retreat. The men's bodies were never recovered. No one has tried since, but this wasn't the first incident. And it wouldn't be the last. In 1896, a British convict escaped from a penal colony in the Andaman Islands and made the fatal mistake of paddling a makeshift raft toward North Sentinel. His body was later found on the beach, riddled with arrow wounds, his throat cut. At the time, the British colonial authorities attempted to investigate, but even then, they knew there would be no justice, no trial, no diplomacy. The island had spoken, and its message was simple: do not come. More recently, in 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Shaw made global headlines when he attempted to bring Christianity to the Sentinelese. Despite knowing the island was protected and access was illegal, Shaw paid local fishermen to smuggle him close to shore. His journal, later recovered, reveals a mixture of religious fervor and growing fear. On his first approach, he shouted Bible verses toward the trees and was met with a boy firing an arrow that struck his waterproof Bible. He called it a sign. He returned the next day. That time, he didn't come back, The fishermen who had brought him to the island later watched from a distance as the tribe dragged Chow's body along the beach and buried it in the sand. Authorities were faced with a choice: enforce the law and retrieve the body, or respect the tribe's isolation. They chose the latter. To this day, Chow's remains lie on the island, not buried in a grave, but in a boundary the world has learned not to cross. These stories, as grim as they are not evidence of cruelty. They are acts of defense. From the Sentinelese point of view, every outsider is a potential killer, not just with weapons, but with disease, with disruption, with ideas. They have seen what contact did to their neighbors. In the 1800s, British colonists attempted to interact with other Andaman tribes. Those that submitted to contact were swiftly devastated by illness and exploitation. Populations that had once numbered in the thousands were reduced to dozens in just a few generations. The Sentinelese know this history, not through books, but through survival. Even when contact was attempted peacefully, the results were mixed at best. In the 1970s and 80s, Indian anthropologists began a series of expeditions to gift the Sentinelese with coconuts, pots, and clothing. At first, the tribe would hide in the jungle. Then they would appear, take the gifts, and vanish. But the interactions never progressed. No friendship was formed. No communication developed. Eventually, the visits were stopped. The Sentinelese had made it clear they weren't interested, and yet fascination continues. The media frames the tribe as savage, unknowable, sometimes even hostile to progress. But the truth is far simpler and more uncomfortable. The Sentinelese aren't attacking. They're refusing. They're rejecting a world they've never asked to be part of. And in doing so, they're challenging the very foundations of our global story. The idea that contact is good, that civilization must expand, that no one can remain separate forever. Their island is not protected by fences or soldiers. It is guarded by memory, by fear, by the knowledge that every footstep from the outside brings risk. They have fought with spears, but more importantly, they have fought with silence. And they have won, again and again. The modern world has learned to respect boundaries only when forced to. North Sentinel Island is one of those rare places where the line is drawn in blood, not treaties. And so we stay away, not out of fear, but because the alternative is worse. For most places on Earth, travel restrictions are a matter of paperwork, timing, or politics. A passport, a visa, an invitation. But North Sentinel Island is different. It is not just hard. To reach, it is illegal. Not recommended, not discouraged, forbidden. Since the 20th century, both colonial and modern authorities have come to the same conclusion. The Sentinelese don't want visitors, and trying to reach them risks lives. The result is one of the most absolute legal walls in the world. A ban not just on entry, but on curiosity itself. The first formal barriers came under British colonial rule, though they were inconsistently enforced. In the late 1800s, after a disastrous attempt to make contact, during which a group of Sentinelese people were kidnapped and brought to Port Blair, where the adults quickly died and the children were returned, even the colonial officers began to understand that this tribe could not be civilized in the way they had imagined. For all their military and administrative power, they could not break the will of the island dot after Indian independence in 1947. The question of North Sentinel became even more pressing. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands were now under Indian control, and by extension, so was North Sentinel. The Indian government had a choice: treat the tribe as fellow citizens, to be integrated and modernized, or as something else entirely. For decades, India walked a careful line. Anthropologists attempted contact. Coconuts were dropped by helicopter. Officials sometimes approached the shore in naval boats. But no progress was ever made by the 1990s. The government changed course. The failure of peaceful contact was no longer seen as a temporary barrier, but as a permanent fact. The risks were too high, the benefits too uncertain, and the Sentinelese had made themselves unmistakably clear. They did not want to be approached. In 2005, after the deadly encounter with two fishermen who had illegally entered the island's waters, India enacted even stricter protections. Under the Andaman and Nicobar Protection of Aboriginal Tribes regulation, it became a criminal offense to get within 3 nautical miles of North Sentinel Island. The Indian Navy began active patrols around the island, not to guard it from invasion, but to guard it from curiosity. The law didn't just ban entry. It criminalized photographs, drone footage, and unauthorized attempts at communication. The island became a ghost zone on official maps, visible yet unreachable. This legal boundary wasn't just symbolic. It was enforced. When John Allen Chau's death made international headlines in 2018, India faced intense pressure to investigate and retrieve his body. But they held their line. Indian officials made it clear. The law was designed not only to protect the tribe, but to protect outsiders. No further action would be taken. No one would land on the beach. No one would open the gate that had been so violently closed. In doing so, the Indian government took a rare stance, one almost no modern nation is willing to take. They chose to preserve isolation, even if it meant leaving questions unanswered. No development, no education, no census, no medical aid. The Sentinelese would remain as they were, uncounted, uncontacted, and untouched. This decision wasn't without controversy. Some human rights activists argued that the tribe was being imprisoned by their own fear, that their freedom to stay isolated shouldn't override the universal right to health, safety, or progress. Others accused the government of romanticizing primitivism, of turning real people into symbols. But the Indian courts held firm. The tribe's autonomy, they argued, could only exist if it was respected in full, including their right to reject help. Behind the legal ban lies a deeper, more uncomfortable truth. The modern world has a terrible track record with isolated peoples. From the Amazon to the Arctic, contact with remote tribes has almost always ended in tragedy, not because of violence, but because of viruses, ideology, and greed. Where governments offered medicine, they often brought surveillance. Where missionaries offered faith, they brought disease. Where settlers brought trade, they left behind war. The Sentinelese, without ever writing a law or signing a treaty, understood this better than most. And in their silence, they taught the world a lesson. Today, North Sentinel Island is one of the few places on Earth where the law forbids curiosity, where ignorance, deliberate, enforced ignorance, is considered an act of respect. And perhaps that's what makes it so powerful. In a world that insists everything must be explored, explained, and cataloged, the existence of a blank space is radical. It challenges the very idea of knowledge. It reminds us that some doors should stay closed, not forever perhaps, but for now, until we're ready or until we learn to ask better questions. The modern world sees contact as a gift, a handshake between civilizations, a chance to exchange knowledge, technology, medicine, language. But for the Sentinelese, contact is not an invitation. It's a threat, one they've spent thousands of years learning to avoid. Because when isolation is broken, the cost is rarely paid by the outsider. It's the tribe, the culture, the fragile way of life that collapses first. The price of contact, in their case, is extinction, not in theory, but in precedent. You don't need to look far to understand this fear. Across the Andaman Islands, a history of friendly contact is a story of disaster. The Great Andamanese, once a thriving group of 10 distinct tribes, were reduced from several thousand people to fewer than 100 in just over a century. The cause? British colonization, forced resettlement, alcohol, and above all, disease. Smallpox, influenza, measles, harmless to the colonizers, fatal to the isolated. Immunity built over generations didn't exist on the islands. Germs did what guns could not. They decimated entire populations. The Jarwa and Onge tribes, once culturally rich and independent, now live in fractured communities. Their language is dying, their rituals fading, their autonomy weakened. They are living reminders of what happens when a world without antibodies meets a world that doesn't know how to stop expanding. And the Sentinelese have seen it all. They watched as the neighboring tribes fell silent. They heard the stories passed along coastal winds of bodies burning, of traditions erased, of outsiders promising help but bringing ruin. Over generations, their resistance hardened. It was not hatred, it was memory. And that memory has made them brutal in their boundaries. When John Allen Shaw landed on the island, he believed he was bringing salvation. But the Sentinelese saw something else. A stranger. A diseased body. A breach in a wall that had protected them for thousands of years. To them, his presence was not a miracle. It was a contagion. And so they responded the only way they knew. How swiftly, violently, and without negotiation. To the world, it looked like murder. But to the Sentinelese, it was survival. And the tragedy is this. Shaw may have agreed with them. His journal, recovered after his death, revealed a deep awareness of the risk he posed. He described himself as a bearer of gifts, but also noted the danger of disease. He quarantined himself before traveling. He attempted to learn a few words in the Andamanese language. He knew what he was doing was illegal, reckless, and possibly deadly for everyone involved. But belief overpowered caution. And belief, in the end, cost him his life. The global reaction to Cho's death was mixed. Some mourned a martyr. Others blamed him for cultural arrogance. But underneath the noise was a deeper realization. Contact, even with good intentions, can be fatal. It's not always about weapons or war. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can bring to an uncontacted tribe is yourself. Scientists and anthropologists have long warned of this. An unvaccinated child can destroy a generation. A friendly handshake can transmit a virus. Even modern items, clothing, plastic, electronics, can disrupt a tribe's ecology, shift their food patterns, alter their beliefs. And once the pattern shifts, it doesn't reset. The past is overwritten. The old ways vanish, one piece at a time. So the question remains, what do we owe to a tribe that wants nothing from us? Do we protect them by reaching out or by staying away? Do we wait until they are ready or accept that they may never be? There are no easy answers. But North Sentinel Island forces us to confront these questions, not as hypotheticals, but as living reality. The island isn't just a forbidden zone. It's a mirror. It reflects our instincts, our arrogance, our desperate need to explore, conquer, explain. And in doing so, it humbles us. Because for once, the story isn't ours to write. It belongs to them, the people who chose silence over speech, solitude over progress, survival over connection. Perhaps that's why the island fascinates us so deeply. It's not just that we're not allowed in, it's that we're not welcome. And in a world where every culture is being folded into one global voice, the Sentinelese remain defiantly unspoken. Their continued existence is a quiet rebellion, a reminder that not all progress is good, and not all connections are worth the cost. So we watch from afar. We listen to the silence. We mark the island on our maps, but promise never to go. And maybe, just maybe, in that distance, we finally learn something not about them, but about ourselves. In most countries, Power is measured by public displays, parades, speeches, televised decrees. But in North Korea, true power hides itself. It doesn't need to be seen to be felt. It exists behind concrete walls, beneath layers of bureaucracy, deep within the capital of Pyongyang. And at the center of it all is something the public was never meant to know. Room 39 got, you won't find Room 39 on any official tour of the capital. It's not marked on maps. There's no plaque on the door. Yet for decades, this single office has operated as one of the most powerful engines of North Korea's survival and one of the most secretive financial operations on Earth. It's not just a department. It's a weapon, a system built to generate wealth, maintain absolute loyalty, and extend the regime's reach far beyond its borders, all without ever stepping into the light. The existence of Room 39 was only confirmed in whispers. Defectors spoke of it cautiously, as if even the name could invite punishment. Intelligence agencies across the globe tried to piece it together. Bank records, intercepted messages, second-hand testimony. But no clear blueprint ever emerged. That was the point. Room 39 is designed not just to operate in secrecy, but to survive because of it. Most believe Room 39 was created in the late 1970s under Kim Il-sung and expanded under Kim Jong-il. It exists outside the reach of regular government oversight. It answers only to the ruling Kim family. And its mission, while never publicly declared, is widely understood: fund the regime by any means necessary. North Korea is a country under siege, diplomatically, economically, culturally. Sanctions, trade bans, and international isolation have squeezed its formal economy to the brink. But the regime has never collapsed. It has never lost its grip. That's not because of agricultural reform or industrial strength. It's because Room 39 has always found another way. Illicit trade, counterfeit currency, front companies, drug production, weapons smuggling, cybercrime. It doesn't matter if it's legal. It only matters that it works. Inside North Korea, money flows in strange patterns. The elite live in a parallel world. Imported goods, luxury apartments, foreign cars. Not because of domestic wealth, but because Room 39 channels invisible income into visible loyalty. It funds palaces, bribes, and control. It ensures that those closest to the top remain fed while the bottom starves. This isn't economic mismanagement. It's strategic distribution, a deliberate act of survival and domination. The power of Room 39 doesn't come from violence or ideology. It comes from being untouchable. No one knows exactly how many people work there, or even where it's truly based. Some believe it's inside a nondescript office building in Pyongyang. Others think it moves frequently. It doesn't advertise its existence. It doesn't leave a trail, just results. Quiet ones, consistent ones, dangerous ones. Room 39 represents a form of modern dictatorship that doesn't rely on tanks or soldiers, but on bank accounts and shell companies. It's a dictatorship that doesn't need to announce itself, because by the time you notice it, it's already too late. For a regime that survives by being closed, Room 39 is the heartbeat. It shows how secrecy itself can be turned into capital, how a government can make invisibility its greatest strength. While the world watches missile tests and parade formations, the real power flows through wires and encrypted instructions, sealed contracts, and false identities. The world doesn't fear Room 39 because of what it shows. It fears it because of what it hides, and how much of it we may never fully understand. Room 39 doesn't operate like a criminal cartel. It operates like a government because it is one. Every transaction, every scheme, every manipulation flows back to the heart of the regime. The world has long treated North Korea as a failed state, cut off from the global economy. But in the shadows, its financial arms reach farther than anyone expects. And it all begins with a simple, chilling idea. When your nation is under economic siege, manipulate the system until the system can't see you. Unlike most illicit networks, Room 39 doesn't hide in jungles or mountains. It hides in plain sight, inside banks, shipping manifests, front companies, and legal gray zones. The people behind it wear suits, not uniforms. They speak fluent Chinese, Japanese, and Russian. They operate out of Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, not North Korean soil. And their goal is singular: generate hard currency, dollars, euros, yen. Not for public welfare, not for infrastructure, but to fund a system that feeds itself. One of the most infamous methods is counterfeiting. For decades, Room 39 has been linked to the production of what experts call supernotes, near-perfect forgeries of U.S. $100 bills. So accurate that even trained professionals struggled to detect them. These weren't amateur operations. The paper, the ink, the printing methods, everything mirrored legitimate minting processes. Intelligence agencies believed the equipment was either stolen or replicated from state sources. Some supernotes even ended up circulating in legitimate financial markets, destabilizing trust in currency itself. When North Korea was finally confronted over them, it denied everything. But the notes kept showing up, and no one else seemed capable of producing them with such terrifying precision. But counterfeiting is only the beginning. Room 39 has mastered the art of laundering money through front companies. Hundreds of businesses, from seafood exporters to mineral traders, appear legitimate on the surface, but their profits flow directly back to the regime. These entities use complex ownership structures, often with foreign nationals as figureheads, to mask their real affiliations. They operate in countries where regulations are loose, enforcement is weak, or officials can be bribed. And when one gets exposed, another quietly takes its place. The manipulation isn't limited to goods. It extends into labor. Thousands of North Korean workers are sent abroad to Russia, China, even parts of Eastern Europe, under state contracts. They work in construction, logging, textile factories. Their wages, however, aren't theirs to keep. Most of it is funneled back to Pyongyang through Room 39 controlled channels. The workers live under surveillance, with little freedom or contact with locals. To the outside world, it may seem like normal economic migration. But for North Korea, it's industrialized exploitation. Labor turned into currency, human beings, into financial assets. And then there's the trade in luxury goods. Despite strict sanctions banning the sale of high-end items to North Korea, elite members of the regime continue to enjoy Swiss watches, French wines, Italian suits, German cars. How? Through carefully crafted supply chains. Middlemen in third. Countries purchase the items legally, then re-export them under false documentation. It's not just about indulgence. It's about control. These goods are distributed by the regime to reward loyalty, to buy silence, to reinforce hierarchy. Luxury becomes currency. Status becomes survival. In recent years, Room 39's financial footprint has extended into digital space. Cybercrime has become one of its most profitable arms. Groups like Lazarus, widely believed to operate under North Korean state direction, have stolen hundreds of millions of dollars through hacking. Operations. Banks in Bangladesh, cryptocurrency exchanges in Japan and South Korea, even ransomware attacks on hospitals and corporations, all traced back to networks suspected of funding the regime. This isn't just cybercrime. It's cyber warfare, weaponized for economic survival. The brilliance of Room 39's financial strategy is that it doesn't rely on one method. It adapts. When sanctions tighten, it shifts tactics. When a route is exposed, it finds another. It plays a long game, a quiet game, and often, by the time its operations are detected, the money is already gone, washed through a dozen countries, cleaned through cooperative or corrupt systems, reinvested into a state that refuses to die. Most frightening of all is how little the world can do to stop it. Every exposure, every ban, every crackdown is a step behind. Because Room 39 is not just an office or a building. It's a mindset, a doctrine of survival built on deception, manipulation, and invisibility. It proves that in the age of global finance, a closed dictatorship can still find cracks in the system and bleed the world one deal at a time. What makes Room 39 so dangerous isn't just what it does, it's where. Though headquartered in the depths of North Korea's capital, its reach is vast, invisible, and shockingly global. This is not a local operation hiding in shadows. It is a transnational machine reaching across oceans and continents, embedded in global markets, and often invisible until damage is done. In a world defined by interconnected systems, Room 39 has exploited the connections more ruthlessly than almost any state actor in the modern era. Room 39 is not fiction. It's not a rumor. It's a reminder. That secrecy can become a system. That control can be built without cages. And that in a connected world, the most dangerous forces are not the ones we see on the news, but the ones we never talk about at all. There are places on Earth that challenge your imagination. Places so harsh, so surreal, that they feel like they were never meant for human eyes. The Danakil Depression, located at the junction of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti, is one of them. From above, it looks like the surface of another planet, a fractured desert of neon pools, jagged salt flats, and volcanic scars. But standing on it, you feel something more primitive. You feel like you've stepped into Earth's memory, a version of the planet before life took hold. It's not just unwelcoming, it's actively hostile. Here, the air itself feels wrong. Temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. That's not just hot, that's death zone hot. Water evaporates before it can settle. Sweat doesn't cool you. It just clings to your skin like panic. The sun doesn't rise here. It explodes, bleaches the sky white, and stays until the night collapses under its weight. There are no shadows. There's no relief. Just heat, pressure, and silence broken only by the hiss of escaping gases from the crust beneath your feet. The Danakil Depression doesn't just kill. It dazzles first. For all its danger, it's one of the most visually stunning landscapes on Earth. The paradox is haunting. A place that seduces with color, lures the eye with strange geometry, and threatens everything that approaches. There are few places where beauty feels so actively dangerous. Pools shimmer in lime green, neon yellow, and blood orange. Crystalline formations twist into impossible shapes. Geysers hiss with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, and yet here they are, glowing like warning signs in a world that wants to remain untouched. These colors come not from light tricks or algae blooms, but from raw chemistry. The pools are not water, they are acid. Sulfuric hydrochloric and other compounds bubble up from deep within the Earth's crust and collect into shallow lakes that look like paradise and burn like poison. Touch them, and your skin dissolves. Inhale too close, and your lungs recoil. The smell is sharp, sour, metallic, a reminder that this place was never designed for comfort. It was built for function. Geologic, chemical, ancient function. The ground here isn't solid in any reliable way. The crust is thin and fragile, a brittle film over roiling, molten forces. Beneath your feet are pockets of acid and steam that shift unpredictably. Step too far off the path, and you might find yourself waist-deep in boiling salt water or fall through a cavity that didn't exist 10 minutes ago. The Earth here isn't just volatile, it's deceptive. It looks walkable. It isn't. The line between surface and depth is paper thin. Salt domes rise from the floor like fractured bones. Mineral terraces bloom outward in layered spirals. The formations look sculpted, as if something designed them. But they weren't created by art. They're born from reaction. When volcanic heat meets brine, when gas vents rupture through mineral-rich soil, these structures build themselves, disintegrate, then rebuild, often overnight. Nothing here is permanent. And yet, nothing here disappears completely either. It's a constantly evolving sculpture of heat and chemistry. Scientists have studied the mineral content of these pools and formations, and what they've found is startling. The waters are supersaturated with heavy metals. Arsenic, iron, magnesium, potassium, not just in trace amounts, but in dangerous concentrations. The crust carries massive deposits of salt, some of it ancient, some of it new. The colors, while beautiful, are warning signs. The vivid yellows and greens signal deadly combinations of sulfur and acid. The reds mark oxidized iron, leached directly from the planet's veins. And yet, despite this danger, the beauty never fades. In fact, it grows stronger the longer you look. The surreal color palette, the otherworldly structures, they feel almost hypnotic. It's no wonder that explorers, photographers, and researchers keep coming back despite the risks. The Danakil Depression doesn't just defy expectations, it reshapes them. You don't just see something alien. You start to question whether this planet ever belonged to us at all. There's something ancient in the way this landscape behaves, like it's remembering something we forgot. Before trees, before animals, before the atmosphere became breathable, Earth looked more like this than any other place you can stand today. The Danakil is a fossil in motion, a snapshot of planetary adolescence, before stability, before green. And the longer you stay, the more you feel that. The way the ground pulses beneath your feet, the way the air hums with energy. It's as if the land itself is still dreaming of fire. The Afar people, who have lived around the edges of the Depression for centuries, see the land as sacred, but not in a way that invites reverence, in a way that demands distance. They believe the colors speak for themselves, that the land is alive and angry, and should be respected like a god that never forgives. Their warnings aren't superstition, they're survival instinct passed down through generations. Even they, who know this land best, don't trust it. They move along its borders like hunters circling a wounded animal. The Danakil Depression is toxic, yes, but it is also irresistible. It's a place where science and myth blur, where geology performs its own kind of ritual. The beauty isn't. In spite of the danger, it is the danger. The color is the signal. The shimmer is the trap. This is not a place of life, but of warning. And yet, in its own strange way, it pulses with something that feels very close to power. Not the kind we understand or can harness, but the kind that reminds us we're guests here, temporary, fragile, an uninvited dot. If the Danakil Depression seems uninhabitable from above, that's because we're used to looking for life we can see. Trees, animals, insects, the signs we associate with survival. But the rules of life don't begin at that scale. They begin far smaller and far stranger. Beneath the acidic pools and burning soil of the Danakil lie organisms that redefine what we think is possible. Not just life on the edge, but life in defiance of every expectation. These aren't the kinds of organisms you could spot with the naked eye. You wouldn't know they were there unless you were looking for them. But scientists have, and what they've found in the heart of this toxic wonderland is astonishing. Microbes, extremophiles, tiny, ancient creatures that thrive in places where heat boils water, where pH levels would destroy normal cells, where salt would desiccate almost anything else into powder. But not them. They live here. They multiply. They evolve. The water in some Danakil pools is as acidic as battery acid. Temperatures can reach 90 degrees Celsius. The salinity can exceed saturation. And yet, microbial life has been documented in several locations. Clinging to mineral walls, swirling in dense brine, dividing in conditions where even industrial equipment fails. These aren't just tough organisms. They are fundamentally alien in their biochemistry. Many are classified as polyextremophiles, creatures that survive not just one impossible condition, but many at once. The cells of these microbes are often coated in thick protective envelopes. Their enzymes are custom evolved to function in extreme heat and acidity. Their metabolism doesn't rely on sunlight or oxygen. Instead, they use chemical processes that seem more at home in the early stages of Earth's formation. Some even thrive in environments with heavy metals like arsenic and magnesium, absorbing toxins that would kill most life instantly and converting them into fuel. This has profound implications. If life can exist here, where everything screams no, then it can exist in places far beyond this planet. The Danakil becomes more than just a geological oddity. It becomes a testing ground, a case study for astrobiology, a preview of what life might look like on Mars or the moons of Jupiter or planets we haven't even named yet. It suggests that biology, once sparked, doesn't need comfort. It only needs opportunity. But these microbes are more than just a curiosity. They are survivors of a lineage that may stretch back billions of years. Life like this may have been Earth's first, simple, chemical, slow, shaping the planet long before plants or animals arrived. Their existence in Danakil isn't an exception. It's a reminder that life didn't begin in lush forests or gentle oceans. It likely began in places just like this, hot, acidic, unstable, and wildly unwelcoming. And this is where the depression becomes more than just terrain. It becomes a time capsule, a glimpse into the world before oxygen, before blue skies, before multicellularity. In these tiny organisms, you can trace the memory of a planet still forming itself, of a time when survival meant adapting not to predators or seasons, but to chemistry itself. The challenge is that studying this life is incredibly difficult. The same conditions that support these extremophiles destroy most lab equipment. Samples degrade quickly when removed from their environment. Contamination is a constant risk, and navigating the site requires protective gear and precise protocols, because one wrong step can mean exposure to toxic gas or a chemical burn. But researchers continue, driven by the sense that what they're studying isn't just rare, it's foundational. What's perhaps most striking is how indifferent this life is to us. These microbes don't care about climate, about politics, about human existence. They have survived for millennia beneath our feet, never noticed, never altered. They exist in a parallel timeline, slow, chemical, constant. And in their indifference, they hold a kind of wisdom, a reminder that life doesn't need to be grand to be extraordinary. Sometimes, survival is enough. In the Danakil Depression, beauty isn't skin deep. It goes all the way down to the cellular level. What seems dead is teeming with secrets. What looks like poison is actually a crucible. And in the hottest, harshest, most inhospitable place on Earth, life still finds a way, not just to exist, but to thrive, quietly, invisibly, without permission. There are landscapes on this planet that don't just resemble another world. They resemble our world long before we ever arrived. The Danakil Depression is one of the closest things we have to a working simulation of ancient Earth. Every crack in its crust, every acidic spring, every boiling fissure offers a glimpse into what the planet may have looked like billions of years ago, when life was still an experiment and survival was chemical, not biological. To most people, it's an extreme desert. But to scientists, especially those working in the fields of planetary science and astrobiology, the Danakil isn't a wasteland. It's a reference point, a living fossil, an open-air laboratory where time runs backward. NASA and other space agencies have shown increasing interest in the region because it mirrors conditions found on celestial bodies like Mars, Europa, and Enceladus. These aren't metaphors. The temperature gradients, salinity levels, acidic composition, and tectonic activity found here have real parallels beyond Earth's atmosphere. When probes land on Mars and send back images of cracked terrain, iron-rich soil, or subsurface brine, the comparisons are direct. The kind of microbial life surviving in Danakil's pools, if it can survive here, suggests it might also survive there. That's not science fiction. It's working theory. NASA's upcoming missions to icy moons and arid planets aren't just looking for water. They're looking for the kind of life that doesn't need Earth's comforts. And the Danakil Depression is one of the best training grounds for finding it. Field researchers from astrobiology divisions have collected samples here in the hopes of identifying metabolic pathways that could function in extraterrestrial environments. These microbes don't rely on oxygen or photosynthesis. They process chemicals, metabolize sulfur, and thrive in isolation. These traits aren't accidents, they're adaptations, ancient ones, and they may resemble how the very first organisms on Earth survived before our atmosphere turned blue dot. The terrain also offers insight into planetary geology. The presence of mineral terraces, salt domes, and hydrothermal activity mimics processes believed to have shaped Mars and early Earth alike. The complex interplay of volcanic energy, saline water, and shifting crust suggests a chaotic but generative system. One that doesn't just destroy, but also creates minerals, ecosystems, and perhaps even precursors to life. And yet, for all the science, there's a strange poetry in it too. Imagine this. The very first sparks of life on Earth didn't happen in a forest or a tranquil sea, but in a place that looked like Danakil. A place where gases rose from vents, where water was too hot to touch, where light was fractured and filtered through chemical haze. It wasn't beauty that birthed us. It was chaos. And Danakil is one of the only places left where that chaos still runs free. That's why astronauts and roboticists have visited the area to test rovers, to simulate missions, to expose sensitive instruments to the kinds of punishment they'll face on other worlds. Danakil's unpredictable terrain, its corrosive atmosphere, and its remote location make it ideal for such preparation. If a drone can fly here, or a sensor can survive here, it has a chance on Mars. The depression isn't just being studied, it's being used. But beyond hardware and hypotheses, the Danakil also challenges something deeper, our definition of life itself. For decades, science searched for life by looking for Earth-like conditions, temperate climates, stable water, organic carbon. But the microbes in Danakil live without any of that. They suggest a broader spectrum, a more flexible equation. And if life can stretch its rules here, maybe it can stretch them anywhere. This is why some scientists refer to Danakil as a terrestrial analog, a place on Earth that mimics alien environments. It's not that it's pretending, it's that it doesn't need to. The alien is already here, and it's been here far longer than we have. In fact, it may outlast us. In that way, the depression becomes more than a landscape. It becomes a riddle, one that we're only beginning to understand. It asks quiet, dangerous questions. What does it mean to be habitable? What defines life? And how much of our planet remains unexplored, not in geography, but in understanding? For every acid pool and salt terrace, there's another secret buried deeper. Another organism we haven't discovered. Another mechanism we haven't mapped. And as our eyes turn outward to the stars, we're reminded, forcefully, that many of the answers may still be buried beneath our own feet. Dennicle's value isn't just in what it teaches us about Earth. It's in how it prepares us for what we haven't found yet. In the boiling pools and toxic winds, in the microscopic stubbornness of life itself, we're being shown the blueprint of possibility. The question is no longer whether we can find life elsewhere. It's whether we're ready to recognize it. When we do not, there are places in the world that seem to whisper a warning before you even arrive, not through signs or fences, but through reputation alone. Snake Island is one of those places. Located just a short boat ride off the southeastern coast of Brazil, it remains completely off-limits to the public. Not because of political conflict or military secrets, but because of something older, something alive. This island, barely 100 acres in size, holds one of the highest concentrations of venomous snakes anywhere on Earth. And not just any snakes, but golden lanceheads. The golden lancehead viper is unlike any other species. It exists nowhere else on the planet. Its scales shimmer with a pale, almost glowing hue, a deceptive beauty that hides a deadly truth. This snake's venom is among the most potent in the world, capable of melting flesh, shutting down organs, and killing a human within an hour if untreated. It strikes fast, coils tighter, and leaves nothing to chance. Even experienced herpetologists approach with extreme caution. And yet, despite its deadliness, there's something almost ghost-like about them. Silent, elegant, and perfectly adapted to their island home. Estimates suggest there may be as many as one snake for every square meter on the island, though numbers fluctuate. Some reports from earlier decades told stories of people stepping ashore and seeing vipers draped across every branch, coiled in the underbrush, waiting in the rocks. Whether or not the density is truly that high, the reality is simple. The island is theirs. Humans do not belong here. What's most disturbing is how quickly the danger blends into the environment. The golden lancehead doesn't hiss or rattle. It waits, perfectly still, often hidden just inches from a trail. It can strike from a tree branch or the forest floor, with precision honed over generations. Unlike many snakes that bite defensively, the golden lancehead strikes to kill, fast and final. And here, there's nowhere to run. No emergency services. No hospitals. No escape. This isn't a place where nature merely coexists with danger. It's a place where danger is the dominant presence. There are no large mammals here. No tourists, no development. Just thick jungle, sea cliffs, and the silent rule of one of the deadliest predators nature ever created. The golden lancehead isn't just a snake. It's a guardian of the island, of its own survival, and of the line between our world and theirs. What makes the golden lancehead so unique and so terrifying isn't just its venom. It's how it came to be. Thousands of years ago, rising sea levels cut Snake Island off from the mainland. What was once part of continental Brazil became an isolated pocket of land floating in the Atlantic, and with it, a trapped population of snakes. Over time, these snakes, once ordinary pit vipers, were forced to evolve. Their environment changed, their prey changed. And so did they. The golden lancehead is the product of this isolation. With no large mammals to hunt, they adapted to prey on birds, fast, evasive, skybound targets. That required a different kind of venom, faster acting, more potent, capable of stopping prey before it could escape. Over generations, their venom became not just deadly, but surgical. A single bite is enough to drop a bird mid-flight. And in a world where food is rare and escape is easy, that level of lethality became essential for survival. But evolution didn't stop with venom. The golden lancehead's physical traits shifted as well. Its head became more slender and elongated, the lancehead shape allowing it to strike with precision. Its coloration lightened, blending in with the sunlit forest floor and dry foliage. And most significantly, it lost all fear of height. Unlike many snakes that remain ground-bound, the golden lancehead is arboreal. It climbs trees and waits, suspended from branches, using gravity to add speed to its strike. In a world of limited space and constant hunger, even the vertical becomes hunting ground. What's fascinating is how quickly, in evolutionary terms, these changes occurred. In just a few thousand years, cut off from predators and isolated. From competitors, the snakes of Snake Island transformed into something the rest of the world had never seen. They became faster, deadlier, and more specialized than their ancestors. They became a symbol of what nature can do when left to its own devices, without interference, without balance, without mercy. And yet, this isolation is a double-edged sword. The same genetic bottleneck that allowed such specialized evolution also makes the species vulnerable. With such a limited population, the golden lancehead is at risk from disease, environmental shifts, and even inbreeding. It is both apex predator, an endangered relic, the peak of evolution, and a species on the edge of survival. In many ways, Snake Island is a microcosm of natural power, a place where life adapted to perfection. But at the cost of fragility, the golden lancehead did not become deadly by choice. It became deadly because it had to. It was shaped by a place that demanded extremes. And now it is trapped by those same extremes. A creature forged by isolation and bound forever to the island that made it. For most people, Snake Island exists more as a myth than a location. It's not just that it's closed to the public, it's that almost no one has reason to go there. And in the absence of witnesses, stories grow. Legends take root in the shadow of the unknown, and Snake Island has cultivated more than its share. Among the most famous is the story of the lighthouse keeper and his family, the last civilians ever allowed to live on the island. As the story goes, decades ago, a man was stationed on the island to maintain its lighthouse. Isolated from the mainland, with only his wife and children for company, he kept the light burning to protect passing ships. But one night, the snakes came, slithering through cracks in the walls, dropping from the rafters, sliding through the underbrush that surrounded their home. They say the family fled into the night, desperate to reach their boat, but they never made it. Days later, a rescue team found their bodies scattered along the trail, covered in bites. The jungle's silent once again. There's no official record of this story. No names, no dates, no documentation. And yet, everyone in the region knows it. Locals tell it as a warning, as a curse, as proof that the island does not want to be inhabited. Whether or not it's true doesn't really matter anymore. It's part of the island now, part of its mythos, part of the reason no one questions the ban. But folklore often hides fragments of truth. The lighthouse is real. It was built in the early 20th century and maintained by the Brazilian Navy. For years, staff rotated through brief assignments, staying just long enough to perform maintenance before being flown or boated off the island. Eventually, it was fully automated, not because the system advanced, but because the risk wasn't worth it anymore. Even trained personnel found the island too unpredictable, too hostile. This divide between myth and reality is what gives Snake Island its aura. It doesn't need monsters. The truth is stranger. The snakes are real. The danger is measurable. But the stories? They make it personal. They turn a scientific anomaly into a whispered legend. They keep the island alive in the minds of people who've never seen it, who never will. And in that space between fact and fear, Snake Island thrives. It doesn't need to kill to prove its danger. It only needs to be remembered. The lighthouse may be empty now, its beacon automated, its doors sealed. But its story continues, flickering quietly through the fog of memory, warning anyone who listens. Some places were never meant for us. The irony of Snake Island is this. One of the deadliest places on Earth is also one of the most protected. Not for our safety, but for the snakes. Despite their reputation, the golden lanceheads are endangered. Their numbers are declining, not because of predators or competition, but because of us. And the only way to save them is to stay away. A paradox that seems hard to grasp. A place too dangerous for humans, too deadly for tourism, is also one of Brazil's most critical conservation zones. The government has made it illegal to set foot on the island without explicit permission from the Brazilian Navy and environmental authorities. Not to prevent panic, not to keep thrill seekers out, but to preserve an ecosystem so fragile that a single careless intrusion could do irreversible damage. Why protect something so lethal? Because nature doesn't make villains. The golden lancehead didn't ask to be feared. It evolved to survive. And now, its survival depends entirely on isolation. Human contact brings risk, disease, habitat destruction, even smuggling. Over the years, poachers have attempted to reach the island to capture the snakes, hoping to sell their venom on the black market. Some succeeded, many did not. But every intrusion weakened the ecosystem, just a little more. Scientists who are granted access must follow strict biosecurity protocols. They wear protective gear not only to avoid bites, but to avoid carrying pathogens onto the island. Their time is limited, their movement controlled. Even research comes at a cost, and every trip is weighed against the risk it brings. Because Snake Island doesn't recover quickly. It's a closed loop, a living fossil. Disturb it, and you don't just harm the snakes. You disrupt a process thousands of years in the making. And so, the solution is one that feels strangely elegant. Leave it alone. The island doesn't need caretakers. It needs silence. It thrives not because of intervention, but because of absence. In a world where humans have claimed nearly every corner of the earth, Snake Island remains untouched. It's not preserved behind glass or monitored by drones. It's preserved by fear. And in that fear lies a rare kind of respect. There's something beautiful in that arrangement. A deadly creature, born of isolation, protected by the very reputation that keeps people away. The golden lancehead isn't a threat to be eradicated. It's a warning to be heeded. A reminder that not every place was made for us. Some places belong to the earth itself, and the best thing we can do is let them be. Deep beneath a hillside in southwestern France lies a world so ancient it predates civilization itself. The Lascaux Caves, discovered by chance in 1940 by a group of teenagers, revealed one of the most breathtaking windows into prehistoric humanity ever found. Inside, the walls burst with life, not of modern invention, but of animals rendered in pigment and motion by hands that lived over 17,000 years ago. Horses, bulls, stags, and bison parade across the stone in shades of ochre, black, red, and yellow, their forms fluid, confident, and astonishingly accurate. It's not just art, it's communication, memory, perhaps even worship. The paintings stretch across chamber walls and ceilings like a forgotten cathedral. Some figures are small and symbolic, others nearly life-size, rendered with perspective and shading that would rival the understanding of a Renaissance master. But these weren't made with brushes or canvases. They were made with crushed minerals, blown through reeds, painted with fingers, and burned into stone with firelight and smoke. There's a presence in the air, not just of age, but of intention. These were not idle sketches. They were stories, warnings, rituals, maybe even dreams. No one knows for certain what they were meant to convey. There are no written words, no known language to accompany the images. But the skill is undeniable. The precision in the hooves of running horses, the layered colors in the horns of wild aurochs, They speak to a people who may have been primitive by our standards, but were deeply connected to the world they lived in. They understood motion. They understood scale. And they understood permanence, that these walls would hold what they could not. The main chamber, known as the Hall of the Bulls, is the most famous. Massive creatures loom across the limestone, swirling as if caught mid-stampede, their energy frozen in time. Nearby, smaller figures, a deer leaping, a bird-headed man, hint at mythology or perhaps a forgotten spiritual code. To walk among them is to stand in the shadow of a mind that could imagine a world far beyond survival. A mind capable of art, and through it, of legacy. Lascaux is not just a cave. It's a time capsule, perfectly preserved in the darkness, untouched by light or wind or weather for thousands of years. And for a brief moment, it was opened, allowing us to glimpse a human truth so old, it almost feels alien. But that moment was fleeting, because what we found in those caves wasn't just fragile, it was endangered. And soon, the story of Lascaux became not one of discovery, but of damage. When the Lascaux caves were first opened to the public in 1948, it felt like a gift to the world. Thousands of visitors came to see the ancient masterpieces, not in photographs or textbooks, but in the stone, up close, surrounded by the still air and dim silence of history. Scientists, artists, and curious travelers walked the same ground as prehistoric painters, breathing the same stale air that had preserved the murals for millennia. But no one realized that every breath, every step, every human body carried danger. With it, the cave had been sealed for over 17,000 years. Its climate was delicate, perfectly balanced, the temperature, humidity, and microbial environment untouched. The moment it was opened, that balance shifted. Carbon dioxide from breath accumulated. Moisture from visitors' clothes and skin entered the air. Light fixtures were installed to help people see the artwork better, but they introduced heat. And then something invisible began to grow. Mold. It started subtly. A patch here, a discoloration there. At first, no one understood the implications. But by the 1960s, dark fungi began to spread across the cave walls. These weren't natural cave molds. They were invasive species introduced by human presence. Airborne spores, bacteria from shoes, sweat, clothing, each microscopic traveler left behind by visitors who came in wonder, not knowing they were accelerating. The cave's destruction. Once introduced, the microbes thrived. The very conditions that had preserved the art now allowed the invaders to multiply. Algae bloomed. Fungi crept across ancient pigments. The walls began to sweat. Conservationists tried to fight back, sealing off portions of the cave, scrubbing the mold, altering airflow, but the damage had already begun. Lascaux was suffocating under the weight of its own popularity. By 1963, the caves were closed to the public indefinitely. The decision was necessary, but it came too late. Even in isolation, the microbial invasions continued, now harder to track, harder to kill. In the decades that followed, new outbreaks occurred: white mold, green mold, black mold, each more aggressive than the last. In trying to preserve the past, humanity had unintentionally contaminated it. Today, the cave is a high-security zone. Only a few scientists and conservators are allowed in each year, for minutes at a time, wearing sterile suits and tracking every step. The air is monitored constantly. Filters run night and day, but there's no reversing the intrusion. The cave breathes differently now. Its immune system has been broken, and the tragedy is deeper than biological. What was once a direct connection to the people of the Paleolithic era, their art, untouched and intact, is now a place of silence not born from reverence, but from necessity. The world wanted to see Lascaux, and in doing so, we nearly destroyed it. After the closure of the original cave, a question emerged. How do you share something with the world that cannot be touched? The answer came in the form of replicas, meticulous recreations of the cave and its artwork, crafted with extraordinary precision. The first, known as Lascaux II, opened in 1983, just a few hundred meters from the original site. Its walls were molded to mirror the original chamber's contours, and every painting was replicated by hand using the same ancient pigments and techniques. Later came Lascaux III, a traveling exhibition that brought the cave to global audiences. And then Lascaux IV, a futuristic museum with digital mapping, virtual tours, and interactive exhibits. The technology was astounding. Laser scans, climate modeling, and pigment analysis ensured that every detail, down to the tiniest flake of paint, was accounted for. Standing inside the replica, you can feel the weight of the past pressing in from every side. The ceiling, the lighting, even the silence. It all feels real, but it isn't. There's a strange emptiness in the perfection. The temperature is controlled. The air is filtered. There is no musk of limestone, no ancient dust, no echo of prehistoric breath. It is a replica, and though it is beautiful, it lacks the one thing that made Lascaux sacred: time. The paintings are exact, but the silence is manufactured. The walls are shaped, but they don't remember. And yet, these replicas serve a vital purpose. They preserve the art while protecting the original. They allow millions to experience what the original cave once offered, without risking further damage. In a way, they've become a solution to a uniquely modern problem: how to honor ancient history without consuming it. Still, something is lost in translation. In Lascaux II, you are not underground. You are not hidden from the world above. The replicas do not age. They do not erode. They do not whisper the way the real cave did. There's no danger, no sense of trespassing into the sacred. The awe is intellectual, not emotional. You admire the skill, but you do not feel the haunting presence of the hands that made it. For some, that's enough. For others, it's a reminder of what can't be copied, the sense that you are touching a moment in time that wasn't meant to be preserved, but was anyway. That in the stillness of a sealed cave, a voice was left behind in paint and stone. A voice that doesn't speak anymore. Not because it has been forgotten, but because it has been replicated. And that's the silent irony of Lascaux. In trying to keep it alive, we had to let it go. The real cave is now dark, still, and utterly alone. Sealed off, not because we don't care, but because we care too much. There are some doors that, once opened, cannot be walked through again. The Lascaux caves remind us that history is not a resource to be mined. It is a moment, a breath, a fragile presence that survives only because it is left untouched. For years, scientists have debated the possibility of reopening the cave, even in a limited or highly controlled capacity. But every conversation ends in the same place. It's too risky. The cost of curiosity has already been too high. The truth is uncomfortable. Some of our most treasured discoveries must remain hidden to be preserved. Lascaux is no longer just an archaeological site. It is a case study in the limits of access, in the tension between sharing and protecting, between knowledge and restraint. And it forces us to confront an idea we rarely like to accept, that not everything is meant to be visited. Some things are meant to be remembered from afar. The cave's current state is one of deep isolation. Inside, advanced environmental monitoring. Systems measure every aspect of the cave's microclimate: temperature, humidity, CO levels, and microbial presence. Even the smallest shift could trigger another mold outbreak. Even a well-meaning intrusion could be catastrophic. The ecosystem inside is now so delicately balanced that silence itself is a form of preservation. And yet, the cave endures. Quietly, patiently, without need for light or praise. The paintings still rest on the walls, their colors still vivid, their outlines still precise. The horses still run, the bulls still charge. The hands of the past still reach out across the stone, frozen in their final gesture. The cave continues to hold them, not because we are watching, but because we are not. There is something poetic in this outcome. We found Lascaux. We adored it. We almost destroyed it. And then we left it alone. It is now one of the rarest things in the modern world, a treasure we have chosen not to touch. And in doing so, we've preserved not just the art, but the silence around it. A silence that speaks louder than crowds ever could. The lesson of Lascaux is not just about preservation. It's about respect. Respect for time. Respect for limits. Respect for the fact that some beauty only survives when it is unobserved. We often assume that progress means access, that if we can go somewhere, we should. But Lascaux teaches the opposite, that wisdom sometimes means staying away. We live in a world where everything is documented, photographed, and shared. But deep inside a sealed cave in France, there exists a place that doesn't need our attention to matter. It existed before we knew it was there. It will continue long after we forget. In the Nevada desert, surrounded by jagged hills and dry lake beds, sits a piece of land so restricted that it didn't officially exist for decades. Area 51, the name itself, is a magnet for speculation. It conjures images of black helicopters, strange lights in the sky, and camo-clad soldiers warning you to turn back. But before it was a conspiracy theory, it was something simpler, and in many ways, even more secretive. A testing ground. One of the most important military research sites in American history, hidden in plain sight. The base was born in the early years of the Cold War. In the 1950s, as tensions with the Soviet Union escalated, the U.S. Air Force needed a remote, secure location to develop and test advanced aircraft. They found it near a dry salt flat called Groom Lake, isolated, empty, and ideal for operations that couldn't afford an audience. Lockheed's famous Skunk Works division used it to test the U-2 spy plane, a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft that would soon play a crucial role in tracking Soviet movements. At the time, even the existence of the U-2 was top secret. So was the airfield. So was everything about it. From there, the pattern began. Build, fly, disappear. The U-2 was followed by the A-12 Oxcart, a faster, sleeker predecessor to the SR-71 Blackbird. These weren't just airplanes. They were shadows in the sky, machines designed to fly so high and so fast that no radar could catch them. Groom Lake became the hub for their development, and the silence surrounding the base only deepened. Pilots worked under code names. Projects were compartmentalized, and the desert swallowed every trace of the impossible. But the secrecy wasn't just about technology. It was about presence. For years, the government refused to acknowledge Area 51 by name. Maps showed only blank space. Employees were flown in on unmarked planes. Security was absolute. The base grew, adding runways, hangars, and underground facilities, but its official status remained non-existent. Even FOI, a Freedom of Information Act, requests hit a wall. To the public, Area 51 was a rumor. To the defense world, it was a fortress. That silence bred fascination. But the truth, the military origin of Area 51, is where the story really starts. Before the alien theories, before the memes and merchandise, there was the reality of a government building the future in total darkness. A place where engineering raced ahead of imagination, and failure could never be admitted. What flew out of Groom Lake didn't just push boundaries, it erased them. And it all happened behind a fence that didn't just keep people out, it kept questions out. What began as a classified military base slowly transformed into something else, something stranger. By the late 1960s, rumors about Area 51 had begun to seep into the public consciousness, carried by radio hosts, pilots, and a growing subculture of skywatchers convinced that what was flying over Nevada wasn't just American hardware, it was extraterrestrial. And the government's silence only added fuel to the fire. The location couldn't have been better suited to legend. Isolated, vast, and easy to patrol, the desert became a theater for speculation. Lights in the sky were common, flashes that changed direction too quickly, objects that left no contrail, crafts that hovered with no visible wings. Most of them were likely test flights of cutting-edge aircraft like the U-2 or the A-12. But to the average observer, or anyone unfamiliar with how radically advanced military tech had become, they might as well have been from another world. The government? They didn't correct the record. In fact, some believe they let the UFO stories grow on purpose. When pilots reported sightings of unknown objects at high altitude, officials sometimes chalked it up to atmospheric conditions or dismissed it entirely. The veil of secrecy meant they didn't have to tell the public the truth, and in some cases, that meant letting the public believe a lie. Better to have people thinking they saw aliens than revealing a spy plane's flight path. This ambiguity deepened in the 1980s, when a man named Bob Lazar claimed to have worked at a nearby facility reverse engineering alien spacecraft. He described saucer-shaped craft, Element 115, and technology that defied physics. His story was never proven, but it spread like wildfire. Suddenly, Area 51 wasn't just a base, it was the center of a growing conspiracy. It became a household name featured in documentaries, news stories, and Hollywood films. The mythology was locked in by the 1990s. Area 51 had become symbolic, not just of aliens, but of everything the government might be hiding. The line between truth and fiction blurred. Was it all a smokescreen? A narrative seeded to protect real secrets? Some researchers believe disinformation campaigns were intentionally used to distract from more terrestrial, but equally sensitive operations like stealth drone programs or high-orbit surveillance tech. In that fog, the truth became unknowable. UFOs became a kind of cultural code, a way to talk about secrecy, about power, about fear. And Area 51 became the stage where those fears played out. The mystery didn't need answers anymore. It only needed silence. And the government, for decades, was happy to provide exactly that. Unlike most military bases, Area 51 doesn't need barbed wire to remind you that you're not welcome. The land itself does that. Long before you ever reach the perimeter, the landscape begins to warn you. Dirt roads become narrower, signs grow more frequent, and then, without fanfare, you reach a boundary that is invisible yet absolute. There are no gates, no guards standing. In plain sight, just the terrain, the silence, and the certainty that you are being watched. Use of deadly force authorized. The signs say it clearly, in bold black letters against white metal. Trespassing is not just discouraged, it's treated as a threat. Hidden cameras monitor every angle. Motion sensors are buried in the dirt. And then there are the camo dudes, unofficially named security contractors who patrol the surrounding hills in white pickup trucks, always watching, rarely speaking. They don't flash badges. They don't answer questions. But they appear the moment you get too close, and their presence alone makes it clear. You are not supposed to be here. This isn't like sneaking into an abandoned building or stumbling across an old military ruin. This is a functioning installation with live patrols, classified operations, and an invisible line that, once crossed, changes everything. People have tested that line. Hikers, thrill seekers, even journalists. and many have been arrested. Some were fined thousands of dollars. Others had their equipment seized. But always, the message was the same. You don't go past the markers. Not for a photo. Not for proof. Not for anything. The severity of the response is part of what fuels the paranoia. Why such extreme secrecy for a base that supposedly tests aircraft? Why the refusal to confirm what's happening inside, even to other branches of government? For years, the existence of Area 51 wasn't even acknowledged in public documents. It wasn't until 2013 that the CIA declassified its name, long after it had become one of the most famous secret locations in the world. By that point, its reputation had far outgrown the facts, but the policy hasn't changed. The land surrounding the base has been expanded over time to push curious onlookers even farther back. Public roads have been closed. Airspace above the site is restricted to all unauthorized aircraft, including commercial flights. The secrecy is not just preserved, it's actively defended. And while there may not be armed guards at the fence line, everyone knows the threat is real. The signs aren't there for show. The people who enforce them aren't actors. In a world of open access and social media transparency, Area 51 remains an anomaly. A place where the rules are different, and where curiosity could cost you more than just a fine. For all the speculation, for all the television specials and blurry satellite images, the central question has always remained the same. What's actually going on inside Area 51? The truth is buried beneath layers of secrecy, but scattered fragments from declassified files, whistleblowers, and defense analysts paint a picture that is both more grounded and perhaps more unsettling than any alien encounter. The original purpose of the base was straightforward: testing aircraft so advanced their very existence could tilt the balance of power in a divided world. In the 1950s and 60s, that meant high-altitude reconnaissance planes like the U-2 and A-12 Oxcart. In the decades that followed, Area 51 continued to push the boundaries of speed, stealth, and surveillance. The F-117 Nighthawk, the first true stealth fighter, was tested here long before the public knew such technology even existed. These were not just weapons, they were ghosts in the sky. More recently, defense experts believe the site has been used for next-generation drone development. Aircraft with no pilots, no windows, and no radar signature, capable of conducting missions over enemy territory without ever being seen. Some reports hint at hypersonic platforms, aircraft that travel 5 times the speed of sound or more. Others suggest experimental propulsion systems, energy weapons, and autonomous flight AI. These are technologies that, if proven successful, wouldn't just change how wars are fought, they'd change how borders are enforced, how intelligence is gathered, how conflict is deterred. And that's only the hardware. Some believe Area 51 may house systems that aren't meant to fly at all. Electronic warfare platforms, cyberweapon testing environments, or surveillance systems capable of monitoring signals across the globe. The desert may be empty, but the data flowing through it could be immense. Satellites, drones, signal intercepts, all routed through a facility that officially doesn't exist. And yet, the alien theories persist, partly because of the government's silence and partly because the truth, classified weapons research, feels too mundane. But there's another reason. Area 51 represents something bigger than itself. It's the modern symbol of the unknown. It stands for everything the public suspects the government isn't telling them, not just about aircraft, but about power, control, and secrets hidden in the open. The question, what's being tested, is really a question about trust, about transparency, about whether the institutions meant to protect us are doing so in ways we'll never fully understand. And maybe that's the point. Area 51 doesn't need to be full of aliens or time machines to be terrifying. All it has to do is keep operating in silence, while the rest of the world watches from a distance, wondering not just what's behind the fences, but what it means that we're not allowed to know. Just off the coast of Venice lies a small, quiet island you'll never find in tourist brochures. Poveglia, nestled in the Venetian lagoon, looks harmless at first glance. A patch of overgrown trees and crumbling stone buildings surrounded by gently lapping water. But the silence hides centuries of suffering. This island, now abandoned and sealed off to the public, was once a final destination for thousands. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a sentence. During the 18th century, as Europe battled waves of bubonic plague, Venice needed a solution. The city's dense streets and constant trade made it vulnerable to outbreaks, and traditional quarantine methods were no longer enough. So authorities turned to isolation. Poveglia became a lazaretto, a quarantine station for the sick. Incoming ships were diverted to the island, and anyone showing symptoms was forcibly removed from their crew and taken ashore. Once there, most never left. Conditions were brutal. Infected patients were housed in makeshift wards, overcrowded and poorly ventilated. Supplies were limited. Doctors wore primitive protective gear, robes soaked in vinegar, bird-like masks, stuffed with herbs, but even they rarely lingered. The island's purpose wasn't to heal. It was to separate the dying from the living. And as outbreaks worsened, it became a mass grave, disguised as a hospital dot. As the death toll rose, efficiency took precedence over compassion. Bodies were stacked in pits. Funeral rites were discarded. Entire barges of plague victims were sent to the island to be burned or buried. The soil grew thick with ash and bone. Some say over 100,000 people died there, their remains consumed by the ground. Others were buried alive, too weak to protest, too contagious to spare. The fear of Poveglia grew with each passing decade. Venetians whispered about it, calling it the island of no return. Children were warned to never sail too close. And when the plague finally retreated, the island was sealed off, left to rot under the weight of its own ghosts. No one wanted to repurpose it. No one dared. Because even in an age of reason, some places still carried the stain of death too deeply to be cleansed. Today, the quarantine ward is gone, overtaken by vines and crumbling under its own decay. But the ground remembers. The island may be silent now, but its silence is not peaceful. It is heavy. It is haunted. The kind of silence that feels like it's listening. If Poveglia's history ended with plague victims and mass graves, that would be enough to stain its legacy. But in the early 20th century, the island's story took a darker, more disturbing turn. As Italy grappled with rising mental health cases and institutional overcrowding, Poveglia was reopened, this time not as a place for the dying, but for the forgotten. A psychiatric hospital was established on the very same land once, soaked in disease and ash. What followed was a chapter of neglect, fear, and cruelty that cemented Poveglia's place as one of the most haunted places in Europe. The hospital operated in near isolation. Patients were ferried across the lagoon, locked behind iron gates, and rarely seen again. With no regular visitors and minimal oversight, the facility became a world unto itself, a closed system where rumor became reality and horror had room to breathe. Stories began to surface of abusive caretakers, experimental treatments, and patients screaming into the night with no one to listen. The asylum wasn't known for healing. It was known for hiding away those society wanted to forget. Most of what we know about the asylum today comes from fragmented records and local folklore, and the two often blur together. There are tales of a doctor who performed lobotomies with crude instruments, drills, chisels, even hammers. He is said to have roamed the corridors at night, selecting patients at random, claiming to cure madness through agony. According to legend, he later threw himself from the hospital's bell tower, tormented by the voices of those he mutilated. His body was never officially identified. Whether these stories are true or embellished doesn't really matter, because the fear they caused was real. Locals avoided the island completely, claiming to hear cries echoing across the water on windless nights. Fishermen refused to cast their nets near the shore. Even the hospital staff, those still living, rarely spoke about what happened inside. The crumbling brick walls. Silence had once again returned to Poveglia, and this time it was stitched with screams no one wanted to remember. The asylum was closed in the late 1960s. Its patients transferred elsewhere, and its buildings left to rot. Nature began reclaiming the site almost immediately. Ivy crawled up broken stone walls. Windows shattered. Floors gave way. And still, the bell tower stood, a silent monument to the whispers of the past. Today, what remains of the hospital is a skeletal ruin, half swallowed by vegetation and shadow. But even in ruin, the island feels inhabited. Tourists who manage to land illegally report an oppressive atmosphere. Some say they've heard footsteps in empty halls. Others describe an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Whether it's ghost stories, guilt, or something older, Poveglia doesn't let visitors forget where they are. The hospital may be gone, but what happened there lingers, like the scent of smoke in clothes long after the fire has burned out. Beneath the tangled vines and weathered ruins of Poveglia lies something far more disturbing than crumbling buildings. The island itself is made of ash. Decades of mass burials, hurried cremations, and forgotten corpses have altered the soil. According to some estimates, over half of the island's ground is human remains, bones crushed into dust, ashes layered. With time, the earth of Poveglia doesn't just hide the dead, it is the dead. During the height of the bubonic plague, speed was more important than ceremony. Corpses arrived by the boatload. Some were thrown into open pits and set ablaze. Others were left where they fell. The sick and dying were often burned alive in desperation, their screams muffled by flames. There wasn't enough manpower to give every soul a grave, so they burned them in great fires that never seemed to end until the island reeked of charred flesh and sickness. And when the fires died out, what remained was worked into the ground, trampled by carts and boots, forgotten under layers of new ash. Centuries later, when the asylum was constructed, the land was still haunted by the weight of its own past. Construction workers unearthed bones with shovels. Fields meant for gardens yielded ribs, skulls, and fragments of charred vertebrae. But there was no pause, no investigation. The bones were either tossed aside or buried deeper. The dead made way for the mad, one layer of misery pressed down atop another. Even now, the evidence of what happened here is impossible to ignore. Soil samples taken by unofficial researchers have revealed high concentrations of human ash. The island's earth is unusually soft and dark, nutrient-rich in the worst way imaginable. Bones still rise to the surface after heavy rains, pushed, but by time and erosion. Visitors have reported finding teeth along the shore. A few even claim to have stepped into shallow pits filled with brittle, sun-bleached fragments. The physical presence of death isn't abstract here. It's not a ghost story. It's not a rumor. It's tangible. You can touch it. You can dig your fingers into it. Every tree, every stone path, every vine that coils around the hospital walls grows from a soil steeped in tragedy. It's the kind of place where the very ground feels sacred and desecrated at once. A cemetery without names, boundaries, or peace. And yet, the island remains, still, untouched, overgrown. The dead here were not honored with monuments or prayers. There are no headstones, no flowers, no visitors, Only whispers, brittle fragments, and the knowledge that beneath every footstep is a history no one is willing to clean up. Poveglia isn't just haunted in the imagination. It's haunted in its foundation, built, quite literally, on death. Today, Poveglia is silent. Not because it's forgotten, but because it's forbidden. The island remains officially off-limits to the public, locked behind bureaucracy and fear. You can see it from the nearby canals of Venice, a shadowed patch of green floating. On still water, its bell tower rising above the trees like a warning. Boats don't dock there. No ferries included on their route. The few who have tried to step onto its shores without permission often return shaken. If they return at all, the Italian government has tried, more than once, to find a use for the island. Over the years, there have been proposals to turn it into a luxury resort, a public park, even a private mansion. In 2014, it was briefly auctioned off to a private buyer with plans for redevelopment. But every effort has collapsed. Investors pull out, contractors refuse to work, permissions are denied. The project dies, and the island remains untouched. As if it refuses to be repurposed, locals don't question this. To them, Poveglia isn't just abandoned, it's cursed. A place where suffering left a stain too deep to scrub away. Fishermen still avoid its waters. Venetian elders still lower their voices when they speak its name. Ghost tours mention it, but only in passing, like a dare no one actually intends to take. Even skeptics, those who scoff at spirits and curses, admit there's something wrong with the island. An unease that settles in the stomach long before your boat reaches the shore. Stories persist of tourists who snuck in and collapsed with unexplained injuries, of voices echoing from empty corridors, of lights flickering where no power lines run. There's even a legend that the very soil repels new life, that plants die, roots rot, and even animals won't linger long. Whether true or embellished, these tales have done what no law enforcement ever could. They've kept people away. Maybe that's how it should be. Not every place is meant to be explored. Some carry a weight that history alone cannot explain, a spiritual heaviness that lingers in the walls, the air, the ground. Poveglia has earned its silence, not through myth, but through centuries of very real pain. Plague victims, asylum prisoners, cremated remains, neglected ruins. These are not the foundations of a peaceful sanctuary. They are warnings, layered in ash and stone. There are thousands of islands in Italy, beautiful, welcoming, full of light. Poveglia is not one of them. It stands alone, wrapped in vines and mist, locked by more than just law. It doesn't need guards or gates. Its past is its own security system. And for now, perhaps forever, it waits in silence. Not abandoned, but deliberately left alone. Just out deep in the Arctic, where the sun disappears for months and the earth is locked in permafrost, lies a structure built not for today, but for the end of everything. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault sits on a remote Norwegian island just over 800 miles from the North Pole, surrounded by glaciers, barren rock, and freezing winds. It's as inhospitable as it is secure. This isn't a laboratory or a farm. It's a fortress, a place where humanity has hidden something vital and terrifying in its implication, the future of life itself. The choice of location was no accident. Svalbard, part of a frozen archipelago between mainland Norway and the North Pole, is geologically stable and politically neutral. Even more importantly, it's cold, naturally cold. The seed vault was carved into the side of a mountain, deep enough to be shielded from nuclear war, rising sea levels, and earthquakes. The permafrost acts as a backup cooling system, preserving what's inside even if all technology fails. If the power cuts out, the cold won't. Reaching the vault is no easy task. There are no highways leading to its steel doors. Access is only possible via narrow, icy roads from the tiny town of Longyearbyen, one of the world's northernmost settlements. Flights are infrequent. The terrain is harsh. In the dead of winter, the landscape is submerged in darkness for weeks at a time. It's the kind of place you don't end up at by mistake. That's the point. This isolation has created a mystique around the facility. From a distance, it resembles a bunker from a post-apocalyptic film, a concrete wedge emerging from a snowy cliffside with a glowing glass and metal sculpture marking its entrance like a frozen beacon. There are no armed guards patrolling the perimeter, no fences or military signage, just silence, snow, and stone. Yet what's stored inside may be more important than gold or oil dot, because this isn't just a vault. It's a message, a signal from our generation to those who might come after us, that we knew things could go wrong, and we tried to prepare. It's also a silent admission that our world, as we know it, might not last forever. Wars, climate collapse, drought, and disease, any one of these could disrupt the systems that keep billions fed. And if that day comes, this quiet Arctic mountain may become one of the last places on Earth that can give us a second chance. The Svalbard Seed Vault isn't just remote by geography. It's remote in intent, built far from the chaos of the world, far from politics and borders, as if it knows it might one day outlive them all. Inside the frozen walls of the Svalbard Seed Vault lie more than 1 million seed samples. Tiny capsules of potential, carefully sealed and categorized, representing over 6,000 plant species from nearly every nation on Earth. Wheat from Syria, rice from Vietnam, corn from Mexico, sorghum from Sudan. These are not just crops, they're the genetic memory of human agriculture, spanning thousands of years. In a crisis, these seeds could be the difference between famine and rebirth. Each deposit into the vault is part of a global collaboration. Countries, universities, and agricultural institutions around the world send duplicates of their most important seed varieties to be frozen in Svalbard. It's like a safety deposit box for civilization, a backup of the global food supply in case the originals are lost to war, disaster, or simple neglect. And the vault doesn't claim ownership. Each country that stores seeds retains full rights to them. The facility itself acts as a custodian, not a bank, holding the keys to a future none of us can predict. What makes this backup so critical is the fragile state of modern agriculture. Today's food systems are incredibly efficient, but also dangerously narrow. A handful of corporations control most of the world's seed trade. Many farmers rely on genetically uniform crops that are vulnerable to disease and changing weather. And as the climate shifts, pests spread, and soil degrades, that vulnerability grows. If a major crop failure were to occur, the diversity locked in Svalbard could offer vital genetic traits to rebuild resilient plants, ones that can withstand heat, drought, or flood. This is not a hypothetical scenario. In 2015, Syria's civil war forced scientists at a regional seed bank in Aleppo to evacuate. The samples stored there were in danger of being destroyed. So, for the first time, the Svalbard Vault was opened not just for storage, but for rescue. Seeds were withdrawn, planted in safer ground, and eventually duplicated again. Proof that the vault is not a museum, but a living resource. Still, the backup is incomplete. Some seed banks around the world lack the funding or infrastructure to send duplicates. Political tensions, poverty, and local instability often delay or prevent participation. And some rare or native crop varieties may never make it to Svalbard at all. What's stored in the vault is impressive, but not absolute. It's a start, not a safeguard. The vault stands as a kind of quiet promise that even if everything else fails, something can begin again. But it also reminds us that our agricultural systems, the very foundation of civilization, are far more vulnerable than we like to admit. The seeds in that Arctic mountain are not there by accident. They are there because the world has seen collapse before, and it knows it could see it again. The Svalbard seed vault wasn't built just to outlast a few bad years. It was engineered to survive the end of the world. From its reinforced concrete entrance to the steel-lined storage chambers buried deep inside a mountain, everything about it suggests finality. If modern civilization were to vanish tomorrow, if the lights went out and governments collapsed, this facility, quietly humming in the Arctic cold, might be one of the last remaining archives of life as we knew it. Its design is deceptively simple. 3 airlocked chambers tunnel into the Plattberget mountain. Inside, rows of high shelves stretch toward the back wall, holding carefully packed boxes of seeds in sealed, oxygen-deprived containers. The entire vault is kept at -18 degrees Celsius, 0 degrees Fahrenheit, the international standard for long-term seed preservation. But the real insurance isn't the technology, it's the location. Even without power, the surrounding permafrost is cold enough to keep the seeds frozen for centuries. The mountain itself acts as both shield and refrigerator. Everything about the facility anticipates catastrophe. Rising sea levels? The vault is elevated 130 meters above sea level, well beyond even the most pessimistic projections. Armed conflict? The vault is in one of the most remote and politically stable regions on Earth. Nuclear war? Its reinforced structure is buried far enough into the mountain to resist radiation and blast pressure. It's not just a storage facility. It's a bunker for biology. And it was built in a time when such planning was no longer optional. As headlines filled with talk of crop failures, pandemics, cyber attacks, and environmental collapse, the vault took on a different tone. What once felt like an abstract insurance policy started to feel alarmingly relevant. The world was beginning to understand that resilience didn't mean resisting change. It meant preparing for the worst. Still, despite its apocalyptic context, there's a strange optimism embedded in the vault's cold walls. To build something like this is to admit fear, but also to express hope. It means believing there will be someone, someday, who might need these seeds. That humanity, even if it breaks, might try again. That after the fire or the flood or the famine, someone might walk through the snow, open that steel door, and find the means to regrow. And unlike bunkers built for the elite or fortresses stocked with gold, the Svalbard Seed Vault wasn't made to protect the powerful. It was made to protect possibility, to offer a future that includes rice, wheat, millet, beans, life in the most literal sense. The vault doesn't hide treasure. It hides potential. What would we need in the final hour? Not oil, not money, seeds, something that grows. Behind the frozen doors of the Svalbard Seed Vault lies a quiet mystery. What exactly is already locked? Inside? Officially, the answer is simple: seeds. Over 1.2 million samples representing nearly every edible plant variety humans have cultivated. But when you begin to break down the list, questions emerge. Some of the seeds come from crops most people have never heard of. Others come from ancient varieties long lost to industrial agriculture. A few have no known commercial use at all. The vault isn't just a library of what we grow now. It's a catalog of what we used to grow, and perhaps what we'll need to grow again. Take, for example, the wild relatives of common crops. These aren't the polished, high-yield strains that dominate modern farms. They're tougher, scrappier ancestors. Wheat that resists disease but produces little grain. Barley that thrives in saltwater. Rice that survives in floodplains. Many of these traits were bred out generations ago in the pursuit of profit and uniformity. But inside the vault, they are preserved like rare fossils, not because of what they are now, but what they might help us become. Then there are the seeds that come from conflict zones. Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan. Regions where local seed banks were destroyed by war or natural disaster. For many of these countries, Svalbard is not just a last resort, it's the only safe copy of their agricultural heritage. Some of these seeds have already been withdrawn and replanted to recover what was lost. Others may sit dormant for decades, waiting for a country to recover, rebuild, and remember what it once grew. But even more intriguing is what's not widely known. The contents of each deposit are recorded, but not all are publicly accessible in detail. Some governments and corporations have sent seeds under confidentiality agreements. The reason? Intellectual property. Some of the seeds are genetically modified or patented varieties that could be worth billions if reintroduced during a global food shortage. Critics have warned that while the vault is publicly managed, private interests could still benefit disproportionately from what's stored there, and that, in a true collapse, ownership could become a contentious issue. And yet, the most unsettling thought is not who owns the seeds, but why we felt the need to store them at all. The vault exists because someone somewhere believed that a time might come when the world could no longer feed itself. A time when nations would fall, climates would shift, and farmers would stand in ruined fields with no crops left to plant. It is a hope chest, but built from fear. Still, hope is there. Every container sealed inside the vault holds more than DNA. It holds a blueprint for survival. They are promises written in husks and kernels, waiting in the dark for hands. That may never come. Or maybe one day will. Not every place was meant to be explored. Some corners of the earth pull away from us, not because they're forgotten, but because they were never ours to claim. A few are sealed by law, others by danger, and some by something older, something unspoken. The places we've seen, the islands, the bunkers, the ruins swallowed by time, all whisper the same warning, that mystery still exists. And it does not always welcome a visitor. In a world mapped down to the centimeter, where satellites hover and cameras never blink, these off-limit spaces remind us of something we've nearly lost, the ability to wonder, to not know, to respect. The unseen, whether it's an island guarded by tribes untouched by time, a vault hidden in the Arctic ice, or a hallway where the walls remember the screams of the past. Some doors are better left closed, and yet we keep looking, because mystery is powerful. It dares us to ask questions we may never answer. It lingers in the gaps between history and myth, science and superstition. And in those gaps, we find stories, stories that matter, stories that haunt, stories that remind us we're still explorers, even if all the maps have already been drawn. So if this journey made you wonder, imagine what else is out there. Subscribe, explore, and don't knock on the wrong door.